All right, Marine, strap in because we're about to take you on a deep dive into some serious intellectual combat.
Ooh, sounds intense.
It is, in a way.
Yeah,
We're tackling MCDP 10.
the Marine Corps Doctrine on Counterinsurgency.
You got it. Now, we may not have worn the boots ourselves,
Definitely not our area of expertise.
but we've been digging deep into this document to help you, Marine, get a real grip on what makes it tick. What makes counterinsurgency tick?
And let me tell you, it is a fascinating beast. Counterinsurgency, as you know, it's not your typical firefight.
Right, not your average Tuesday.
It's a struggle for the very soul of a nation. We're talking about winning hearts and minds, navigating these complex social and political landscape.
Definitely not just about firepower, then.
Nope. You're using every tool in your arsenal, not just the ones that go boom.
Okay, that does sound intense. Where do we even begin to unpack all of that? I mean, what even is insurgency, and how do you counter it? How do you even start to think about that?
Well, think of insurgency like as a virus infecting the political body of a nation.
Of
Yeah, it uses violence and subversion to challenge the established order, aiming to seize control. And the insurgents. They're masters of adaptation, using everything from propaganda and religious appeals to economic sabotage and outright attacks to achieve their goals.
So they'll use anything and everything.
They'll use whatever works. And they blend right into the population, making it incredibly difficult to distinguish friend from foe.
So it's not like fighting a traditional army, then. You can't just clearly identify the enemy on the battlefield.
Exactly. And that's what makes counterinsurgency so challenging. It's about understanding those root causes of the insurgency, addressing the grievances that are fueling it, and building trust with that local population.
It's about proving that you're there to help.
It's about demonstrating that the established government, not the insurgents, can offer a better future, that they're the ones to trust.
So how do you actually fight something like that? MCDP 10 talks about counterinsurgency requiring actions counterintuitive to traditional warfare. I gotta admit, that's pretty intriguing.
Think of it this way. In traditional warfare, you might focus on overwhelming the enemy, right? With firepower, maneuver.
Shock and awe.
Exactly. But in counterinsurgency, sometimes the most powerful weapon is restraint. It's about understanding that every bullet fired, every house searched, can have unintended consequences.
You can't just go in guns blazing.
Right. You got to think long term. And this is where MCDP 10 really gets interesting. It flips the script on conventional thinking.
Like a whole different playbook.
Right. One of the most important thinkers on war, Karl von Clausewitz, said that the most crucial decision a leader makes is understanding the kind of war they're fighting.
Knowing your enemy and knowing yourself.
You can't win a counterinsurgency by applying the same tactics you'd use against a conventional army.
So what does this different kind of war look like in practice? What are some of those counterintuitive actions that MCDP 10 emphasizes?
Well, it all starts with recognizing that the population is the center of gravity. David Galula, another brilliant mind in counterinsurgency theory, said that military action is secondary. Its primary purpose is to give the government the space to work with the people to address their needs to build that trust.
So it's not just about eliminating the enemy.
Right.
It's about winning the support of the people and isolating the insurgents. It's about building a stable and secure environment where the government can actually function effectively.
Exactly. And that requires a deep understanding of the local culture, the social dynamics, the grievances that fuel the insurgency. You can't just come in with a cookie-cutter solution and expect it to work.
You got to tailor your approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every situation's unique.
Speaking of understanding the local context, MCDP 10 also dives into some very specific contemporary challenges, especially relevant in today's world.
Oh, definitely. The world's changed a lot.
One that really jumps out is information warfare.
Ah, yes. Information warfare. In the age of instant global communication, it's become absolutely critical in counterinsurgency. Think about it. A single incident, even a minor one, can be twisted and amplified through social media and traditional news outlets.
Things can go viral so fast.
Right. And it can potentially undermine months of hard-won progress.
So you're not just fighting on the ground, you're fighting in the minds of the people, trying to shape perceptions and counter enemy propaganda. The document calls this managing expectations.
Right. It's about setting realistic goals, both for your own forces and for the population. You can't promise the moon and deliver a pebble.
Got to be honest about what's achievable.
Absolutely. Remember the man on the moon syndrome?
That's a good one.
When expectations get inflated beyond what's achievable, disillusionment sets in, and that's fertile ground for the insurgency to exploit.
They'll capitalize on that disappointment.
For sure.
So Under-promise, over-deliver. Be honest about the challenges and show consistent progress over time. But most importantly, ensure your actions match your words,
Words and deeds have to align.
especially when everything you do is under a microscope in the age of the internet.
Absolutely. Any inconsistency, any perceived hypocrisy can be instantly amplified and exploited by the enemy.
This brings us to another really fascinating and honestly kind of paradoxical aspect of counterinsurgency, the use of force.
Yes, the use of force. It's a necessary evil in counterinsurgency, but it's a double-edged sword. MCDP 10 makes it very clear that while force is sometimes necessary to protect the population and neutralize insurgent threats, restraint and proportionality are paramount.
Got to use the right amount of force at the right time.
Exactly. And there's that powerful line from the document: an operation that kills 5 insurgents is counterproductive if collateral damage leads to the generation of 50 new insurgents. It really drives the point home.
Yeah, that one sticks with you.
It does. And it highlights a critical principle. You can't win a counterinsurgency by simply racking up body counts. In fact, excessive or indiscriminate use of force can be incredibly counterproductive. You risk alienating the population, creating more insurgents than you eliminate.
It's like using a sledgehammer to swat a fly. You might get the fly, but you'll also destroy everything around it. MCDP 10 seems to be saying you need to use a scalpel, not a sledgehammer.
Precisely. Minimizing collateral damage and civilian casualties is not just a moral imperative, it's a tactical one as well. And MCDP 10 goes even further, highlighting the importance of considering who wields the force.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. In some situations, it might be more effective for local police forces to conduct operations, especially in urban areas, rather than the military.
So instead of rolling in with tanks and troops, you have the local police, who are already familiar with the community, handling the situation.
Exactly.
That makes sense, especially if you're trying to avoid the perception of a foreign occupying force.
Exactly. It reinforces the legitimacy of local institutions and helps build trust with the population.
But wouldn't that depend on the specific context? I mean, what if the local police are seen as corrupt or ineffective?
You're absolutely right. It all comes back to understanding the local context, the nuances of the situation. There's no one-size-fits-all approach in counterinsurgency. You have to constantly assess, adapt, and tailor your actions to the specific circumstances you're facing.
All right, Maureen, we've covered a lot of ground already. The nature of insurgency, the importance of the population, information warfare, the paradox of force. Ready to keep diving deeper into MCDP 10.
Absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to unpack.
Stay with us then, Maureen. This is where things get even more interesting.
Welcome back, Maureen. We've just discussed some of the, core ideas in MCDP 10, but now let's talk about one of the, I think, most crucial elements for success in counterinsurgency.
Okay, lay it on me.
Adaptability.
Adaptability.
You got to be able to adapt. Because let's be real, the enemy you're facing in this kind of fight, they're not going to stand still, are they? And just let you figure them out.
Right, it's not a static enemy.
No. They're going to be shifting tactics, learning, and adapting just as fast as you are.
So it's like a constant chess match.
Exactly. And MCDP 10 is crystal clear on this point. You have to be a learning organization, constantly evolving and changing your approach to stay one step ahead.
Always thinking, always evolving.
Because these guys, they're often embedded deep within the population. They understand the local terrain like the back of their hand. They're masters at exploiting any weakness you show.
So it's not just about having the latest gear or the best training.
It's about having the right mindset. You got to be able to think on your feet, Analyze the situation, learn from your mistakes, and adjust your approach.
Got to be flexible.
Right. And it's also about sharing those hard-won lessons, making sure those best practices filter down through the ranks so the entire force benefits from the collective experience.
Knowledge is power, especially in a situation like this.
Absolutely.
MCDP 10 also talks about the importance of attacking the insurgent network. Now, this sounds a little different from, traditional warfare where you might focus on destroying enemy units or capturing territory.
It is. Attacking the network, it's like going after the nervous system of the insurgency. You're trying to disrupt their ability to operate, to recruit, to get funding, and to maintain their control over the population.
Okay, so disrupting their ability to function as a cohesive unit.
Exactly. So it's less about brute force and more about precision strikes.
Yeah.
You're trying to identify those key nodes, and links in the network, the individuals and organizations that keep the insurgency running and disrupt their operations.
Take out the key players.
Yeah, you got it. Think of it like a game of chess, where you're not just trying to capture pieces, but to dismantle your opponent's entire strategy. You need to understand their structure, their communication channels, their logistics, and their leadership.
And cut off the head of the snake, so to speak.
Exactly. But, these networks aren't static, are they? They're constantly changing, adapting, and evolving. So how do you even keep track of something like that, let alone disrupt it?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's got to be like trying to hit a moving target.
It takes a multifaceted approach. You need sophisticated intelligence gathering, often working hand in hand with local partners who have their fingers on the pulse of the community. They know what's going on. And it's also crucial to understand those social dynamics at play, who influences whom, and how information flows through the network.
So you need eyes and ears everywhere.
Basically, yeah. So it's a combination of good intel, local knowledge, and the ability to analyze and adapt your strategy based on that ever-changing situation on the ground.
Sounds like a lot to juggle.
It is. And this is where the concept of mission command comes into play, something MCDP 1, though, emphasizes heavily.
Okay. Mission command. Now, that's a term we hear a lot in military circles, but how does it apply to counterinsurgency specifically?
Well, mission command is all about empowering leaders at all levels to make decisions based on their understanding of the situation on the ground. Things can change rapidly in counterinsurgency, and those closest to the action often have the best grasp of what needs to be done.
So trusting the judgment of those on the front lines.
Exactly. So it's less about top-down control, you see, and more about giving your Marines the flexibility to act, to adapt, to make decisions within the framework of the overall mission.
Giving them the freedom to operate within certain parameters.
Right. It's about fostering a culture of trust and mutual understanding, where subordinates feel confident in their ability to exercise initiative and make sound judgments. It's also about giving them clear objectives and the freedom to figure out the best way to achieve them, within the commander's intent, of course.
So having a clear understanding of the overall objective, but the freedom to adapt your approach as needed. This all ties back to the ultimate goal of counterinsurgency, which is enabling the host nation to stand on its own, to provide security and stability for its own people. You're not there to fight their war for them, right? You're there to help them fight their own.
That's a really key point. And MCDP 1.0 drives that home. The document emphasizes that, the U.S. military is there to support the host nation, not to take over or impose a solution. You're there to build up their capacity, to train and advise their security forces, to help them develop effective institutions, and ultimately to transition responsibility to them.
It's about empowering them, giving them the tools and knowledge they need to succeed on their own.
Right. And that requires a different approach than just training them to fight like us, right?
Not a one-size-fits-all approach.
You can't just force-fit them into a mold that might not be appropriate for their culture, their capabilities or their context. You have to understand their needs, their strengths, their weaknesses, and tailor your training and assistance accordingly.
It's about meeting them where they are and helping them build on their own strengths.
Exactly. Now, MCDP 1.0 provides a list of practices that have proven successful, as well as ones that have failed in counterinsurgency campaigns.
Like a lessons learned kind of thing.
The common thread seems to be this. The successful ones prioritize the human element. They emphasize understanding the needs and perspectives of the population, building trust, and establishing legitimacy.
So it's all about winning hearts and minds.
You got it. Things like prioritizing intelligence gathering, focusing on securing the population, conducting effective information operations, and empowering local security forces. Those are all like hallmarks of successful counterinsurgency operations.
So focusing on the people, building trust, and empowering them to take ownership of their own security.
Exactly. And on the flip side, ignoring the population, relying too heavily on brute force, or trying to impose solutions from the outside, that's almost guaranteed recipes for failure.
So working with the people, not against them.
That's the key takeaway here. Now, MCDP 1.0 acknowledges that counterinsurgency is a complex beast. There are no easy answers. It takes patience, persistence, and a willingness to adapt and learn, both from your own experiences and from the experiences of others.
It's a constantly evolving challenge.
Right.
All right, Maureen, we've talked about adaptability, attacking the network, mission command, and the importance of supporting the host nation. Now let's shift gears a bit and tackle one of the most fascinating and honestly thought-provoking sections of MCDP 10,
Okay, what's that?
the paradoxes of counterinsurgency.
Ah, the paradoxes. This is where MCDP 1 really challenges conventional thinking about warfare. It forces us to look at counterinsurgency through a different lens.
It's like looking at a problem from all angles, not just the
Yeah,
obvious one.
exactly. Now, these paradoxes highlight the counterintuitive nature of this type of conflict, you see. They show that things aren't always as straightforward as they seem. Sometimes the best course of action is the one that goes against your gut instinct.
So it's about thinking outside the box, challenging assumptions.
Right. Now, one paradox that often trips people up is the idea that sometimes the more force is used, the less effective it is.
Wait, hold on. That sounds counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? On the surface, it sounds crazy, right?
Hmm.
But when you dig a little deeper, it makes perfect sense. Because in counterinsurgency, you're not just trying to destroy the enemy, you're trying to win over the population. And if you use excessive force, you risk alienating the very people you're trying to protect and win over.
You're causing more harm than good.
Exactly. Think about the Second Battle of Fallujah. The U.S. military's use of overwhelming force initially seems successful, right, in crushing the insurgency. But in the long run, it alienated the population, fueled resentment, and contributed to the rise of even more extreme groups like ISIS.
So it's a cautionary tale.
It is. It's a perfect example of how brute force can backfire in a counterinsurgency environment.
It's like that old saying, you can win the battle but lose the war.
Right.
Another paradox that really struck me is the idea that the more you protect your force, the less secure you may be. How can that be?
Well, picture this. You're hunkered down in a fortified base, right? Surrounded by concrete barriers and razor wire. Separated from the population, you might feel safe in the moment, but you're also isolated. You lose touch with what's happening on the ground, you become blind to those nuances of the local situation, and you become vulnerable to enemy propaganda.
So you're creating a bubble that separates you from the very people you need to understand and work with.
Precisely. So you're trading short-term security for long-term vulnerability.
You're isolating yourself.
It's about finding that balance between protecting your forces and engaging with the population. It's about accepting a certain level of risk, you see, in order to build those relationships, to gather intelligence, and to demonstrate your commitment to the people you're there to help.
You can't win hearts and minds from behind a wall.
No.
Another paradox that really gets to the heart of MCDP 10 is the idea that many important decisions are not made by generals. So what does that mean for you as a Marine on the ground? What does that actually look like?
It means that in counterinsurgency, leadership is decentralized. It's not just about following orders from the top down, it's about understanding the commander's intent, assessing the situation, and taking initiative to achieve the desired outcome.
So it's about empowering those lower level leaders
Yeah.
to make decisions that can have a significant impact.
Right. So it's about empowering junior leaders, even down to the squad level, to make decisions that can have a significant impact on the mission. They're the ones on the ground, interacting with the population, seeing the nuances of the situation firsthand.
They have the ground truth.
Exactly. And MCDP 1 Neuro encourages that kind of disciplined initiative where junior leaders are given the trust and the freedom to act within the framework of the mission.
Trusting their judgment.
It recognizes that in counterinsurgency, the situation can change so rapidly. And those closest to the action often have the best grasp of what needs to be done.
So being able to adapt and react quickly is essential. All right, Marine, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into MCDP 10. We've explored the complexities of counterinsurgency, the importance of the population, the challenges of information warfare, and the paradoxical nature of this type of conflict.
We've barely scratched the surface, but hopefully we've given you a good overview.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll break down what all of this means for you as a Marine in a real-world counterinsurgency environment. All right, Marine, welcome back. Final push. We've been dissecting MCDP 10, getting into the the nitty-gritty of counterinsurgency.
All the nuts and bolts.
Exactly. And now it's time to bring it all home. How do these concepts actually translate to your experience on the ground, boots on the ground, in a real-world counterinsurgency environment?
Well, one of the, I think, most powerful takeaways from MCDP 10, and something that I think is really important for every Marine to grasp, is the emphasis on decentralization, empowering junior leaders, giving them the freedom to make decisions based on their understanding of the situation.
Because they're the ones in the thick of it.
That's what can make or break a mission in this kind of fight.
Yeah, we talked earlier about mission command and how it gives Marines the flexibility to act within the commander's intent. It's about trusting your Marines, knowing they've got the training and the judgment to make the right call,
Yeah.
when things get a little chaotic.
Absolutely. MCDP 10 calls it disciplined initiative, and it's a vital part of what makes the Marine Corps so effective. You're not just following orders blindly, you're thinking, adapting, taking charge of the situation.
Freaking on your feet.
Right, and that ties back to what we discussed earlier, the need for the entire force to be a learning organization. It's not just about the generals making the big decisions. It's about learning and adapting at every level.
From top to bottom.
From the squad leader on patrol all the way up the chain of command.
So for you, Marine, this means being proactive. Don't just wait for orders. Ask questions, Seek out information. Constantly try to improve your understanding of what's happening around you. You're not just a cog in a machine. You're a thinking, adaptable part of a dynamic force.
Right, and never underestimate the importance of building relationships with the local population.
Yeah, we keep coming back to that.
It's a core principle of MCDP 10. Remember, in counterinsurgency, the people are the center of gravity.
You got to win them over.
And it's not just about, being friendly or handing out humanitarian aid. It's about genuine engagement.
Showing that you care.
Building trust.
Yeah.
Demonstrating respect for their culture, their customs, and showing that you're there to help them build a better future.
You're there to help them, not force your ways on them.
Exactly. It's about understanding their concerns, their grievances, their hopes, and their dreams. Working with them, not just for them.
MCDP 10 also stresses the importance of clear and consistent messaging, both to your own forces and to the local population.
Yeah, think back to our conversation about information warfare. Controlling the narrative is crucial. You need to be able to articulate your mission, your goals, your values in a way that resonates with the people.
You got to get your message across.
And you need to be able to counter enemy propaganda. The insurgents are going to be working just as hard, if not harder, to spread their message and undermine your efforts. You need to be able to expose their lies and distortions and offer a more compelling, a truthful narrative.
You got to be able to counter their spin.
Right.
One final thought for you, Marine.
Okay.
Remember that counterinsurgency is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes patience, persistence, and a long-term commitment to see it through.
It's not a quick fix.
No. There will be setbacks,
Yeah.
frustrations, moments where it feels like you're not making progress, but it's vital to stay focused on the mission, maintain your discipline, and never lose sight of that ultimate goal.
What's that goal?
Helping the host nation achieve lasting peace and stability.
MCDP 10 provides an invaluable framework, I think, for understanding and conducting counterinsurgency operations. It lays out the principles, the challenges, the paradoxes of this complex and demanding form of warfare. But it's up to you, Marine, to apply those principles on the ground, right?
Let's make it real.
To adapt them to those specific situations you face, and to use your judgment, your initiative, to make a difference.
And Marine, we hope this deep dive has given you a deeper appreciation for the nuances of counterinsurgency and the brilliance, really, of MCDP 10.
It's a really insightful document.
It's a testament to the Marine Corps' ability to learn, adapt, and evolve to meet the challenges of an ever-changing world. So thanks for joining us, Marine. Stay safe out there and keep fighting the good fight. Semper Fire.